Coming to you from RIMS headquarters in New York, this is RIMScast, the official podcast of the Risk and Insurance Management Society. I am Justin Smulison, Business Content Manager here at RIMS, and your proud RIMScast host. This is episode 377, and we are delighted to be joined by RIMS 2026 President Manny Padilla. We're going to learn about his plans for the presidency and his unique career in risk and pre-risk. But first, let's talk about virtual workshops, starting with the RIMS CRMP. The next RIMS CRMP Fed virtual workshop will be led by our good friend Joe Mayo on February 17th and 18th. And on March 10th, we have a RIMS CRMP exam prep with John Button, recent RIMScast guest. And on March 4th and 5th, we have a virtual workshop facilitating risk-based decision-making with our good friend Joe Milan. He's always fantastic. Register today and strengthen your risk knowledge. RIMS members always enjoy deep discounts on the virtual workshops. And on with the show. I am so pleased to present our guest today. He is someone who's been a big supporter of this show for years, and I'm thrilled that he is our 70th president here at RIMS. I'm talking about Manny Padilla. He was RIMS vice president last year, and he's been a truly positive force on the board. Manny is also the Vice President for Risk Management and Insurance for McAndrews and Forbes Incorporated. He is also a RIMS CRMP holder, and he truly loves risk management, which is why I am confident he is going to be a fantastic RIMS president. We're going to talk about his career pre-risk management and bring us up to the present, what his experience with RIMS has been like, and his perspective on what it takes to achieve success in the profession today. Let's get to it. RIMS 2026 President Manny Padilla, welcome to RIMScast. Manny Padilla, our RIMS 2026 President, is joining us here on RIMScast. Welcome back, Manny.
Well, thank you very much, Justin. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Likewise, it's great to see you again. You were on, I think, a couple of years ago now, and I see you at various RIMS events, and you've got the presence on stage the last year or two, and now you've got center stage this year. How's it feel to be RIMS president?
Well, again, early days, but everyone's energy is really up there, and I'm looking forward to having a very positive 2026.
Excellent. And what was it like being vice president, just out of curiosity?
A lot of learning, and that's a really good question because the board membership of the board participation is very much a training program.
Yeah.
You learn to see how the organization responds, and you get into the executive board, and you really start to see how this thing is put together, so to speak, and how it's run. And as you move forward from secretary to president, you pick up a lot of training. It's a good training program.
That's excellent. Yeah, because we saw you on stage with Kristen Peed a lot last year. So you were one of the faces of the organization, and you seem to have a great chemistry on stage.
Absolutely. And that's also, it's RIMS indicative. I mean, we're not a bunch of stodgy old folks that are running around in circles. I mean, there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot to do. There's a lot of information to impart to our professional society. And we're very active, and we're very motivated to get that information out there.
Excellent. So, and just to remind everyone, you are the 70th president of RIMS. So you got the big 7-0, and that's cool. And I want to go in the Wayback Machine, or the time traveling DeLorean, if you will. And I want to go back to 1992, because that's when your connection to RIMS dates back to. And you first attended Risk World on a scholarship. Is that right?
That's correct. I mean, back then it was called the Anita Benedetti Student Involvement Program.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually met Anita back then. And it was as simple as I saw something on the board at what was then the College of Insurance, which is now the Greenberg School of Risk Management, Insurance, and Actuarial Science. And I applied for it, and Anita said, okay, come on down. And the first trip was down to New Orleans. So you can imagine, coming from Brooklyn down to New Orleans, that was a pretty exciting change for me.
And was that your first time there?
In New Orleans, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so that was definitely an eye-opener for you. And I've heard that name several times. That's a name that continues to resonate with our members and our community. So she certainly has a legacy. And how did that experience being in New Orleans, not just the New Orleans part of it, but the risk world part of it, how did that shape your early career and keep you engaged with RIMS?
Mm. Well, and going back to the College of Insurance, I was actually sponsored by an insurance company. So I was in the underwriting world. I was, an assistant, junior underwriter, get things together type person. And again, that was back in the days where computers were just meant to write letters and to fill out policy forms.
Right.
But the connection then was all I knew was one side of the business. So I went down there just because it, got me out of school, got me out of New York for a week or so. And when I figured out what this risk management thing was, my eyes opened up and I said, well, this is the thing that fits best for me. It was more than just back then going into the office in the morning and leaving in the afternoon, sending the policy write-ups to the typing department who would then put it together to this whole transaction of really looking at risk, being very strategic, doing things and making sure that the assets of the company were protected. So that resonated a lot with me at that point in time in my life.
Excellent. Now I know you a little bit. I know you as a people person.
Uh,
So did that experience bring that out in you?
Well, I'm not really sure. I do know that, and I'll give a story. When, underwriters and brokers used to answer their phone, it was a, hello, this is Kemper. How can I help you? And as an example, well, I kind of added something to that. I said, Kemper Boiler Machinery, this is Manuel Padilla. How are we
Yeah.
having a great day? How can I help you? So that kind of training or that approach definitely made it different. And what I found from the very first days is that this is a relationship business.
Right.
It is not, the somebody, and I'm not going to pick on them, but it's not HR department picking up the phone and saying HR.
Right.
It's, very direct, you're doing business with, and people have an open mind and are willing to listen. That doesn't mean it's not a no, but at the very
Right.
least, they're willing to listen and to hear you out.
Excellent. So you go back about 35 years to your first risk world. Do you still see people there who you met in the first one today?
It's funny is I definitely have relationships that have spawned that length of period of time.
Yeah.
Some of them that were first done there, and
Hmm.
a couple of years later they became my primary vendors, etc. So the answer is yes and no.
Yeah.
There has been a lot of change in the last decade. I will say that since COVID started to today, there's a whole new group of new professionals that are going to Risk World, some for the first time, and to be blunt, has been too long for them to wait that long.
Right. Right.
But
Right.
but there's a different energy in the organization, and I think it's as our technology develops and as we become more crucial and more central to the companies that we manage and represent, it's you're seeing it on the floor, which is a good thing.
Yeah. So in your view, it's a better late than never sort of scenario.
Uh, yes,
Yeah.
definitely definitely that. I also would say that as professionals and particularly with those that are listening to this podcast, you need to step out of the from behind the table and you need to go into the industry. And the industry you're going to find is very welcoming and is also going to provide you with a significant amount of opportunities.
Excellent. So one of the things I noticed in the press release that went out about the announcement that you were going to be our president was that you're the first RIMS president of Hispanic descent. Now, that's a historic moment for the society. What sort of milestone does that mean to you personally, and what do you hope it represents for the future of the profession and for RIMS?
Right. So, personally, it's meaningful. I
Yeah.
mean, importantly, though, RIMS has always extended a hand to all. I've never felt that it was not inclusive. That was one of the things that I first noticed when I stepped on, to the conference room floor, so to speak. And it's not changed. I met some of the most unique persons on the planet through RIMS. So some of them that I call my personal friends. So this environment has always been inclusive. It's also been one that's tried to support everyone that's been in this world in to become a better professional. I've met some persons that have done tremendous work at organizations that are big organizations that have Hispanic leaders. So it's great to get the recognition, but I'm not going to say it's secondary. It was just comfortable because RIMS has always allowed that type of environment, and it is a good environment. If you're looking at a career change, or you're looking at expanding your horizons, this is the organization that you team up with for development.
Excellent. Let's also talk a little bit about your risk philosophy. You've emphasized the importance of stepping back to see the bigger picture in risk management. Is there another moment in your career where you can harken back to where it changed how you approached a risk decision because you were seeing that bigger picture?
Well, bigger picture, strategy, risk managers, they're all part of what we're made of.
Yeah.
Risk managers, when we're practicing our profession, we do better when we do raise our hands and we say, well, this doesn't smell right. And sometimes it's just that pessimistic approach that risk managers have. But also, we tend to be more strategic and more, forward thinking and more practical when we're executing, our missions. So I always raise my hand at the board meetings and I say, well, 1 + 1 is 60. That's not working. Or, this investment that we do not make today, it's a small investment, but this is what it leads to. So, seeing the big picture, it also comes with a responsibility. It's the responsibility to say, well, the insurance carrier says LMNOP, it's not for the insurance carrier, it's for you. Having not being able to operate a significant portion of your business model is, you lose your customers. Yes, you can do risk transfer. Risk transfer becomes the easier part of the transaction. But if your product is not on the shelves, your customers go to your competitors, and they may not come back to you until 4 or 5 months when whatever product they're using needs to be replaced, and they may stay with that alternative.
Right. Now, it's worth mentioning you've got such a fascinating career. And I say that to all the RIMS presidents, and I mean it though. You all have fascinating careers. Yours stands out a little bit differently than a lot of others because you have military experience. And I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about that.
Got it. Well, a shout out in general to all my veterans, and that there are more of us here than you can imagine. But
Yeah.
no, so as far as our focus is concerned, what that experience has always given me, and I start with my military experience back to Boy Scouts and then Sea Cadets, and then U.S. Navy. I literally was in the Navy 24 hours after I graduated from high school.
Oh,
Not that
really?
it, yeah,
It was that
not that
quick.
Yes, not that I had to. That was all planned,
Okay.
and I had my own mission and things that I needed to do in life and opportunities, and that's taken me around the world. I've literally been to every country on the planet except those that are sanctioned, so just to be clear.
Amazing. And that, I just want to put that out there that that was from 1982 to 1988. Is that right? You were in the Navy?
That's correct. That's
Yes.
correct.
Amazing. And
Yeah.
well, generally speaking, I mean, it's a, in hindsight, it's a wild time to be in the Navy, right? For the United States.
Absolutely. I mean, there were Reagan years.
Yeah.
That there were
Yeah.
some despots around the world that I won't name that were, saber rattling, absolutely.
Yeah.
There were some, prisoners that actually came and that were taken at different parts of the world that I actually met while I was in the military. And then, it was just a wonderful time. The wall came down during my time frame as well.
Right. I was just going to say it was toward the end of the Cold War, and you had it's just a fascinating time to be serving the country. And then you transition over to you were assistant master at arms for Fighter Squadron 124 in San Diego. Well, of course you're going to choose San Diego. Who wouldn't choose San Diego? I would choose San Diego.
Well, I wish I chose it. It was assigned to me, but I was very happy. But it was also very practical. I was
Yeah.
on aircraft carriers that were stationed out of San Diego, and I needed to take it was an interim position for a time frame. But the big thing that happened during that time frame was Top Gun was filmed on the base there at Miramar Naval Air Station.
Oh, really? Okay, so you got to hang out with Tom?
Well, I didn't get to hang out with him, but I definitely met him
Oh, you
and met
did?
the
Okay.
rest of the crew. Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, it was a 5-minute meeting, etc. Because their hangar was literally across from our hangar, and they were in the Top Gun school, and there was a lot of filming, and some of the officers that were in the fighter squadron were actually in the movie, and
Yeah.
particularly in the fun portion of the club scene, etc. A lot of those guys in the background were also Fighter Squadron 124 instructors.
Now, wasn't his character based on a real guy?
You know what? So the answer is I don't know, but there was an individual, and I'm not going to mention his name. You can go and look him up. He
Yep.
actually became a yeah, I'm not sure if he was a governor or a congressman in San Diego.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
yes, he was the Top Gun.
Right. I remember reading that he was not just created for the film. He was based on a real person who did serve the country, uh, generally, in the armed forces, and then also he went to government. It's a
Yeah, he was a
fascinating
stud.
story.
He was a stud. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's just and so when you have and then so you have this wonderful military experience, and then you're also an educator, right? Or an adjunct
Yes,
to
I'm an
that?
adjunct at the Greenberg School of Risk Management.
So when you have hearkening, that's a good callback to what you said earlier. So when you have this jambalaya of experiences, how does it inform the way that you teach and the way that you approach risk management?
Well, what's funny is that you get some latitude in how you teach. What you teach usually is kind of centered to a bunch of accepted books and pamphlets and information. But the one element, and I start off my courses with this particular pitch, is that there's the technology that you need to know, and then there's the practice that I'm going to teach you.
Okay.
And what we do is we link, the basic definitions, the structures, and the policy designs to real world situations and my experience on how those situations were handled. And a lot of that has to do with customization of products and policies to address your specific risk exposures. And then you go back to the risk management process. You go to RIMS CRMP issues. You go to the ARM type of approaches, and you just basically center it back, because at the end of the day, every policy and every program is custom, and it's based on the risk appetite and the risk tolerance of an individual company, and what they've decided to do.
Let's take one quick break to plug Risk World 2026, which will be held in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, May 3rd through the 6th. This is your chance to connect, cultivate, and collaborate with thousands of risk professionals and business leaders worldwide. General registration is open. Booth sales are still open. Visit rims.org/riskworld to register. And folks, be sure to do so by February 28th. That is the last date to lock in advanced rates, aka the early bird rates. So lock in those rates, register today, and make it the hashtag best risk world ever. All right, and now let's return to our interview with a man who will be having a presence on stage at Risk World 2026, RIMS 2026 President Manny Padilla. And are you more of a ISO person or a COSO person?
So there's so much overlap and
Okay.
cross-lapping that I don't do one versus the other. So I would say that I'm kind of both,
Take from
because
both.
because both have shared technologies and shared wording, but you need to understand each, because you can be in different jurisdictions, and within jurisdictions you have audits, and then within those audits they may be biased into one side versus the other. So you have to be prepared to address both of the issues. But it's good. That's kind of a setup question, because can you be one or the other? I don't think you really can. I think you have
Yeah.
to be a little bit of both.
Right. Okay. And probably, I'm sure there are others. Those are just the first two that come to mind for me.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Now, Manny, when your presidency was announced, there was a quote where you encouraged risk professionals to invest in themselves. Now, clearly, you're walking the walk. You invested in yourself. You had this wonderful career even before you got to college. So that is amazing in itself. What in 2026 does investment in oneself look like today in practical? I'm going to take that again. Hold on.
No problem.
In 2026, what does investment in oneself look like in practical terms for early career professionals versus seasoned leaders?
Understood. So listen, investing in yourself has multiple meanings here. It
Yeah.
has a direct meaning. It has a kind of we need to kind of think this through a little bit more for ourselves as well. So I'll use it from a selfish perspective. But
Okay.
for early career professionals, investing in yourself means, building your technical depth and professional credibility. It means understanding policies. It means understanding claims dynamics, means understanding financial impact on how it affects you, but also understanding the industry and how the industry, comes into play. As you become more seasoned, the investment shifts through strategic issues of fluency, so to speak. It means understanding enterprise risk, governance, capital strategy, and how emerging risks that are changing daily through technology, geopolitics, which has become very much front and center in these last few years, climate, which is not going away and has become more traceable, litigation, and the impacts of all those opportunities and how they interact with each other. It
Yeah.
also means investing time in mentoring and developing future leaders, because number one, that expands your ability to manage your own duties, but also it allows others to come into the industry and get new ideas and come through different issues. But lastly, it's about, and I'll tell you what the thing that always comes and then kind of quirks me is that when I speak to my fellow risk management professionals and I say, well, am I going to see you at Risk World as an example? And they say, well, my company, my budget, my company won't pay for that, et cetera. And I sit there and I say to myself, okay, I understand that issue, but
Mhm.
it's your career.
Right.
It's you are the brand. While the company will pay you to learn, that's fine, but you are the person that carries this forward into the future. I see that, I'll say it's negative from the perspective that if you don't invest in yourself, if you don't get out there to meet these people that are moving and shaking in the industry, to meet these underwriters that and try to figure out why they're going in a particular direction, you pay the price
Yeah.
and you also lose out on the opportunity. And that's how I've always looked at this. It's not that I needed to be the smartest person in the room. I'm definitely not, but I definitely needed to know who was
Yeah.
and where they're headed. And you'd be surprised, particularly an environment like Risk World, where you ask an underwriter a very direct question on why they made a particular decision, and they're not going to give you a mealy mouth, well, just because. They'll tell you.
Yeah.
And that interchange of communication allows you to, basically fix your pitch for the next time you sit with them. So you could address those concerns and, hopefully reduce costs and, more importantly, protect your assets.
Excellent. Now, I also want to bring up we've got the legislative summit coming up, March 18th and 19th.
So the Legislative Summit, it goes back to my experience at RIMS. Back then it was called the RIMS conference, but at
Yeah.
Risk World, for the first time, my eyes were open like you wouldn't believe. I sat there, I was a little nervous because I mean it's a little challenging and it's a little, overwhelming to think that you're going to go into the government to speak with, congressmen and senators and legislative folks, et cetera, and they're going to tell you to do something or say something. But when I got there and I figured out, number one, what develop a new skill, which is, how to approach and how to discuss, sensitive topics with,
Yeah.
regulatory bodies, then meeting other people that are basically focused in that particular area. But when you sit across the table and you speak about federal flood program, the terrorism program,
Yeah.
the pandemic risk insurance program, the qualified risk manager description, and you move it through, these various channels, it's mind-boggling. And
Yep.
it's also it's one of the most rewarding things I've done as a professional. And while they know you're a risk insurance person, you're not there to, represent your company. You're there to kind of represent the association.
Right. You're there to represent the profession. When you're on Capitol Hill, do you ever do the old I serve my country sort of a thing? And just to try to get further into the house and speak to higher ups?
Well, I also have a relationship with the Coast Guard Auxiliary. I've been with
Right,
them
right,
for
right. Yeah,
20
yeah.
plus years. So, no, they do have a legislative group there, and I usually step into the office, say hello to people, and kind of dress up and try to figure out, how things are going, and also learn as to how policy gets through, the many different myriad of issues. But listen, the overall, you're there to pitch a
Right.
very specific set of topics.
Mm.
And they are very willing to listen to the topics. In some cases, they are the policy experts on that topic. And what they're looking for is just a variety of different approaches from actual professionals, which is the we in the group, and they refine you know their development of policy based on these meetings. So it is very helpful to participate. And
Are
you're
you
also
good
all invited.
are you good at memorizing the pitch?
So, sometimes so the answer is yes and no.
Okay.
So the pitch is very specific to a particular person. So for example, and I won't mention, a congressman or senator's name, but it was a senator he was the federal flood guy.
Right.
And, make a long story short, pitching them or trying to convince them that they're right is not something that was important. But what was important is that there were other members of Congress and the Senate that were either on or not on. And what we did as a legislative group is we knew who was going to what, particular county or state, and we were able to team up with them to kind of have them consider coming on board. And those are the types of things that you get through the legislative summit. Not only do you learn you learn how the connections are and to do this more efficiently, so to speak.
Who do you like being paired up with when you're broken up into groups to go meet with?
Well, I'm not gonna admit to that. I like
Oh,
anyone and everyone.
okay.
Um, what I do go after is that in some cases we do have some affiliations with some insurance carriers as well, and
Okay.
some brokerage operations, some vendors, and I like going with them as well
Okay,
because in
cool.
some cases they have a very robust program and a robust system in place, and it's good to see the professionals at the table and how they do it. But I will say that we, as professional risk managers, we don't do too badly.
No,
There's we don't go in there and go do the humanas and move on. We do add a lot of value, and they do appreciate that.
yeah. I remember, I mean, I've been there once. I was tagging along with Mark Prysock, our
Hmm.
GC,
Yes.
Gary Raymond, who I believe was with FedEx at the time, and our president then, Robert Cartwright. So I had a great window view, basically. I was the shadow, and I had a blast, and I was watching how if they needed a visual cue, they had a map, and they showed the flood zones and things like
Yes.
that, and it was wild, and I'm glad you're gonna be there kinda helping to lead the charge this year. What are some of do you wanna mention a couple of our priorities? Just you mentioned a couple earlier. Do you wanna bring them right back to the forefront again?
Well, so there is a list, and unfortunately, I don't have the list in front of me. But the major priority is the federal flood program
Yep,
and the Terrorism Risk Act. And what tends to happen is that every year they get extended for a short period of time,
yep,
and it's just extended until the next time the Congress comes together to argue about something else, and then it's always under a threat of not being renewed, but then it gets extended as well. So that is one of the key issues that keeps on coming up. But what I would do is refer you to the Legislative Affairs page
yep.
at rims.org, and they have
RIMS.org/advocacy.
there you go.
Yeah, it
And
is, yeah.
then in there they do have the 4 or 5 different advocacy events and
Mhm.
issues. But out to the first day of at the Legislative Affairs, summit is the sitting down and talking about the specifics of each of the items. And then we bring in some experts that are, again, experts in that particular area. And then we start to talk about what is on the table, or I guess what is on the floor is the proper term, to be able to get through Congress and to get final agreements.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we've got Mark Prysock coming up next week, so we're gonna let him do a deeper dive for us on that. But sounds like it's something you're looking forward to. I look forward to having you
Absolutely.
represent us. So I think it's going to be great. And earlier you could have said, "I'd like to be paired up with Lynn Haley Pilarski." I think she's wonderful.
Lynn's fantastic.
She's
She's got so
fantastic.
much energy.
That I was trying to lob that in for you, high and slow.
Not a problem. Well, sorry, Lynn. I'll see you in a couple months.
So, for those of you who are just listening and maybe you can't see this episode, Manny has a ton of certifications after his name. The first, of course, is RIMS CRMP, and you've got so many designations and certifications that you have achieved. I was wondering, because we met years ago. I don't remember exactly when we met, but our first interview was about the RIMS CRMP. And in that interview, you mentioned that it is something that can help risk professionals stand out by signaling a commitment to continuous learning. How do you think that? I mean, I know you set the bar very high. I mean, look at how long that list of abbreviations goes. It's almost hitting the top of your head there in
Mm.
the frame. So when you look at something like that, is that something that you think all risk professionals should shoot for? Or what role do certifications play in the broader career development of anyone?
Got it. Well, listen, we can take two approaches to that. One is, how do you stack up with your peers?
Right.
How do corporations look at you as compared to other options, and how, when you're looking for the different opportunities in your lifetime, how do you basically prove that you actually have, higher knowledge than, the average Joe or Jane. And so certification is the way of going there. But also, and it's come out most recently, I think within the last week or so, Josh and the group over at RIMS released the compensation survey.
Yes, they did.
And if you go to the compensation survey and you pick out, and I think it's on page 55, because I had an interview on this particular issue, and you start looking at the differences in pay, which is, be blunt, this is how one way of how we kind of compare ourselves.
Sure.
Pay for persons that have no designation, persons that have any designation, and persons that have a RIM CRMP certification, which is, the top notch, risk management certification on the planet, as far as I'm concerned. It's also the only ANSI certified certification. You will see the difference in the six figures. So, from a selfish perspective, I would rather have a nice designation that pays me six figures more than you. Not that we're picking on you,
Yeah.
but thank you for being an underperformer,
Mhm.
because everybody else is heading in different directions. That's not to say that people should have a certification for just because. You also have to demonstrate I'll use the term love or a like for this industry. And you have to also prove that you're keeping up. A good portion of my designations have really been based on, again, my major at the College of Insurance was, guess what? Risk management and insurance. But, as you move forward in time, what you find is that same technology changes. The words change. The approaches change. I mean, in my career, we went from having just being a risk manager to being a strategic risk manager.
Right.
And then this thing called enterprise risk management was put together. And God only knows what the next version is, or a combination of those two. But they all mean different things. However, we should be certified. We should have these designations so that we understand the world of what we're living in.
Okay. And that leads me to sort of a closing point. Are there certain trends or challenges that you believe are shaping the profession in 2026? And how are you going to address them as president?
Yeah, so, listen, we're facing a convergence of risks.
Yeah.
I think the term is polycrisis.
Yes, it is.
We have geopolitical instability. accelerated technology adoption, climate expectations, both good and bad, and an increasingly complex litigation environment. And then, the financial world is, at odds with each other. It depends on, what the government says at any given point in time. So these risks don't exist independently anymore. I used to joke, and I did an interview a number of years ago where they said, "Well, what are the catastrophes that you're concerned with?" My response was, "I deal with catastrophes every day.
Right.
It's calamities that are happening, and those things I'm trying to stay one step ahead of that." So I think that the mindset of we need to start thinking, or at least acknowledging, the strategic nature of risks and the ability to address them, simultaneously. What we also need to keep in mind as well is that we live in an environment where the digital access to information and data and real financial information is comes very quickly. There was a time 20 years ago where you had an earthquake in one part of the world, a flood in the other part of the world, and a major fire in another part of the world. And if you weren't directly impacted by it, you really didn't pay attention to the others because it
Right.
took a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to even get some basic information on it. Today, God forbid somebody gets hit at a corner in Shenzhen, and it's on the news as if, if 10,000 people were injured. Now,
Right.
not that we're looking for that situation,
Of
but
course not.
information is just piling on and coming in, at a velocity that's mind-boggling at times.
Speaking of mind-boggling, can you believe it was a year ago that those LA wildfires were happening?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
ridiculous. Yeah.
it is ridiculous, and
And they're still kinda reeling from that, right? They
oh,
haven't
they haven't even
recovered.
started.
No.
They haven't even started. Yeah, I watch too much TV. I'll admit that. But what I heard is the person that won the $1 billion mega or Powerball.
Mhm.
His business model is to acquire some of those properties. So for the future, when they do get built, he basically becomes a prominent landlord, and
Oh,
God
really?
bless him. Yeah. And again,
Okay.
it's media, not to pick at you guys because you're in the media business. Who knows if it's truth anymore?
Right. And who's you guys? I'm in the RIMS business. I'm not allowed to be in media business. It's all
True,
good.
true.
Um, Manny, so it's been such a pleasure to see you, and I'm so very much looking forward to what you're gonna bring to the presidency this year. And is there any other parting words regarding what people can expect at Risk World, things that you're looking out for? Anything, any words of wisdom? Any floor is yours.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Not very many people let me speak in open mic situation, but I appreciate the time. If I had a closing, I would basically say, many thanks to all of you that are listening here. It's an honor to have been selected as the 2026 president for the association. I ask that each of you participate with RIMS at our many professional events and learning opportunities. We are open and seeking out leaders and participants at the chapter level, the many committees we support, and at our legislative events. Don't be shy, engage, and invest in yourself. And see you all at Risk World.
Special thanks again to RIMS 2026 President Manny Padilla for rejoining us here on RIMScast. It is always a pleasure to see him. I've got links to Manny's prior RIMScast episode as well as the press release announcing his presidency. As we said, Manny will be at the RIMS Legislative Summit March 18th and 19th in Washington, D.C. That's 2 days of advocating for the best interests of the risk profession. You must be a member to attend, and book your hotel room by February 16th to register and reserve your hotel room at the special RIMS rate of $359 per night at the Sofitel, Washington, D.C. Register at rims.org/advocacy. And now I want to speak about a topic near and dear to my heart: sponsorships. You can sponsor a RIMScast episode either on our publicly facing weekly show, that's this show, or with a dedicated episode. RIMScast has produced special episodes for JB Boda, The Hartford, Alliant, Zurich, Highwire, AXA XL, Prudent Insurance Brokers, High Trust, and Aon. Links to sponsored episodes are on our show notes. RIMScast has a global audience comprised of risk and insurance professionals, legal professionals, students, business leaders, C-suite executives, and more. Let's collaborate and help you reach them. Contact pd@rims.org for more information. Let's talk about RIMS membership, folks. Become a RIMS member and get access to the tools, thought leadership, and network you need to succeed. Visit rims.org/membership or email membershipdpt@rims.org for more information. And let's also talk about risk knowledge. This is the RIMS searchable content library that provides relevant information for today's risk professionals. Available materials include RIMS executive reports, survey findings, contributed articles, industry research, benchmarking data, and more. For the best reporting on the profession of risk management, check out Risk Management Magazine, the Society's official monthly publication. You can find this on rmmagazine.com. It is written and published by the best minds in risk management. My name is Justin Smulison, Business Content Manager here at RIMS. Please remember to subscribe to RIMScast on your favorite podcasting app. Email us at content@rims.org. Practice good risk management, stay safe, and thank you again for your continuous support.